these big goals, they seem so big. They seem Mount Everest size. How could I ever get from the first day I opened my business to having, $100 million business? Well, here's what it is. You stack the small rocks day by day by day by day. And before you know it, you have a Mount Everest size. You've achieved the summit of a Mount Everest size goal.
The steps required to achieve a goal, whether it is small or big, are fairly similar. Today, Colin O'Brady, a man who broke some crazy world records and achieved one of the biggest feats of endurance in history, is going to talk us through exactly that. How to achieve step by step small goals and big goals. This is the guy that we should be listening to. Today's video was sponsored by mulliganbrothers.com, where you can now get the Not a Journal and the Rise and Grind t-shirts and so much more linked in the description. Purchasing those t-shirts helps make this possible. I am your host, Jordan Mulligan. Let's jump into the video with Colin O'Brady talking exactly how to achieve big and small goals. Listen out for one tip in particular.
I think that there's a feeling in our lives when we are at a certain moment, especially when it's bad, we have this feeling like it's always gonna be that way. Like that's just the human condition. Like, oh my God, I made a bad investment and I lost all of my money. I'm gonna be broke forever, right? Or I'm burning a fire, I'm bandaged from the waist down, I'm never gonna walk again normally. This is how it's always gonna be. But I choose to look at it a little bit differently, and I certainly learned this over time. I'm big into meditation, and there's a Buddhist, very old Buddhist mantra, which is commonly used, which is this too shall pass, or this too shall change, meaning like we're never in a permanent state. And once you can realize that, realize that you can open up the vastness of possibility. Just like, yeah, in this moment, like this sucks, or like I said, I lost all my money, or the person I love broke up with me and my heart is broken, or whatever that is. But also leaning into like, this is not a permanent state. So I can build back, I can grow, I can evolve, I can learn from this moment. And I mean, it's somewhat cliche, but sometimes it's worthwhile to say cliche. Like my mom, she put that chair in front of me, that wooden chair. It's like, okay, you want to race a triathlon? That might take you 18 months or 2 years to get there. But the first thing is to take your first step, to actually change your circumstance in the smallest, most incremental way. And I think we're all capable of doing that. Particularly, you mentioned goals. I find for myself that having that big goal out there, being like, okay, I can't walk, I want to race a triathlon, that's important because that's your guiding North Star. But you zoom back from that for a second and you go, that seems so far. How do I even bridge the distance between, like you said, there's so much that happened between there. And so it's about the incremental goals are actually the most valuable. It's the next step to the chair, and then the 10 steps the following day, and then the finally getting out of my parents' basement and moving to Chicago. It's that how can you make yourself feel fulfilled and incrementally improving your situation? Because those 1% gains is ultimately what adds up to the vastness. I talk about this in the context, I've climbed Mount Everest twice, and standing at the bottom of Mount Everest and you look up at the tallest mountain in the world and you think to yourself like, man, like that's so far, how am I ever gonna get there? I don't have them with me right now, but they're in the other room. I have these two small rocks from both times I've summited Mount Everest. I've taken them from the summit and I carry them, I keep them close to me. For the reason is that it's a reminder that even Mount Everest, the largest mountain in the world, can be broken down to its smallest incremental parts. Mount Everest is actually just a bunch of small rocks stacked on top of each other, many steps leading to the summit. And I think we can apply that in our own lives. These big goals, they seem so big. They seem Mount Everest size. How could I ever get from the first day I opened my business to having, $100 million business? Well, here's what it is. You stack the small rocks day by day by day by day. And before you know it, you have a Mount Everest size. You've achieved the summit of a Mount Everest size goal.
Yeah, I mean, so many people create these grand goals, and I think they scare themselves. They genuinely scare themselves, and I think, and then there's the other type of person who would have put their head down and look up, and they're halfway there, or almost just from taking a step at a time. How did you decide to go from doing the triathlon and go, yeah, that was fun. I'm going to do something bigger and grander. Like, why did you keep doing that? And how did you get to that point?
Yeah, so after that triathlon, like I said, I had taken a job in finance. I have an economics degree from Yale. Thought I would, work in some space of that, I guess. But I won this triathlon, and it's like I'm like a year into my first ever kind of real job as a 23-year-old guy. And this may have seemed like a bad career decision, so to speak, but I won this triathlon. A guy who I know said, hey, I'll give you a little bit of funding to help sponsor you if you want to train triathlon more full time. You clearly have, a knack for this. So I didn't hesitate at all. I just walked in and quit my day job on that Monday. And most people were like, what do you mean? You have this great job and you're going to be a professional triathlete? Like, that's not like being, a footballer or, in the NBA or something like that. That's like being super poor and sleeping on your friends' couches and riding your bike around. Even the Brownlees, who are famous over in the UK, they've done well for themselves, but there's a very rare few that like make that level, and even them, they're not like footballers or anything like that, right? And so but I wanted to cultivate that passion inside of myself, so I ended up racing triathlon professionally all over the world, 25 countries, 6 different continents, and over about a 6-year period of time. And then I kind of asked myself, what does the little boy inside of me still want? What's the, what were my childhood dreams? Now that I am, at this point in my late 20s at that point. And I said, I always wanted to climb Mount Everest. That was just something I just, as a little kid, I was obsessed with, I was curious about, never knew it was possible. And now I felt like I was equipped with the mentality, the mindset, the support. It's going to take me a lot of challenge to raise the money, et cetera, but I was much closer to believing that that was possible. And so I stopped racing triathlon and I set myself this goal of doing something called the Explorers Grand Slam. So that's to climb the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, which are the 7 summits, as well as complete expeditions to both the North Pole and South Pole. And fewer than 50 people in history had ever done that. And I was saying, I want to be the fastest. I want to set the world record for the cumulative time. So not taking any rest between the mountains, but actually going, from Kilimanjaro to Denali to Everest to North Pole to South Pole without taking any breaks, in between, basically. And I set my sights on that. Now, it's important to note, because this is true of, that was my first big world record project. And as I said, I have 10 world records now. So I've continued this process over time. I knew a little bit about climbing mountains. I grew up climbing some mountains and stuff like that, but certainly not at the level of the technical proficiency. I knew nothing about polar exploration to the poles. But again, the fixed mindset would say, well, I don't know these things, I'm never going to know it. But the growth mindset says, you know what? I want to do these things. I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there, but I can learn that. I can evolve. I can pull in experts. I can pull in coaches. I can learn. I can be curious. I can Google stuff. I can YouTube stuff, whatever that is. And I think that's so important, because we get caught up. We set this big goal, but then we go, no, that's for other people. You would have had to been doing that for your whole life, or I'm not the kind of person who knows how to do this. But instead, I set that big goal, and I was like, I looked at my wife, massive supporter of mine. We've built everything and created together. My wife, Jenna, she's incredible. And we're both like, cool. So we have no idea how we're going to do this, but awesome. That's exciting. We're excited by the process of learning that. So anyways, triathlon led to this Explorers Grand Slam. I ended up doing all of those mountains, the 7 summits in the North and South Pole, in 139 days consecutively, and setting 2 world records for the Explorers Grand Slam and the 7 summits. And a question that I started asking during that time, I have this nonprofit where I focus on inspiring young kids around the same concepts we're talking about, aspirational goal setting. And so when I was actually climbing Mount Everest, we were doing some social media campaigns. We were talking to school kids all over the world. And Jenna started saying over my social media, hey, Colin is climbing Mount Everest right now as a part of this bigger world record project. But she started asking hey, what's your Everest? A metaphor to kids. They can understand, what is your big, seemingly out of reach goal? What is your Everest? It's fun to ask young kids this question. I've done this for years now. In a gymnasium of elementary school kids, you ask that question and 500 hands shoot up in the air, because they're still they're still creative and willing to share that because life hasn't knocked them down. Now, I do a lot of public speaking at corporations and things like that. You ask a room of 500 adults, what's your childhood dream, or what's your Everest, or what's your big goal? And like, you're lucky to get like one hand in the back of the room shoot up, because of adults, we have a little bit of limiting beliefs. We've been knocked down by life enough to be like, oh, I thought I could do this, but honestly, I'm just gonna like be complacent about my place in life. So as fun as it is to ask kids this question, I realize it's actually a more important and valuable question to ask adults. More so, I realized I needed to ask myself this question, right? Like, I had just climbed Mount Everest, but I'm 30 years old. I have 2 world records, but what am I going to do? Just kick my feet up and do nothing for the rest of my life? I actually asked myself, what is my next Everest? What is my next massive goal to continue this? And that's when I set my sights on not just a world record, but a world first, actually doing something that nobody in history had ever done, which was complete the world's first solo, unsupported, which means no resupplies of food or fuel, and a fully human-powered crossing of Antarctica from one coast to the South Pole to the other coast, something that a lot of British explorers actually over time had tried. No one had succeeded yet. So that was my next Everest. Many people said it was impossible. My book is actually called The Impossible First, as is the project, because I said, hey, people say it's impossible. This might be impossible, actually, but I'm still willing to try. Like, I'm still willing to aim that high, because if I succeed, great. But if I fail, at least I've failed trying to do something as hard as I possibly can and pouring my heart and soul into it.
Thank you so much to Colin O'Brady. This guy has achieved some of the biggest feats of endurance in history. And that's why I think that the way that he describes this is the way we should be doing it, or the way it's one of those ways that we should take into consideration and listen to. So thank you so much to Colin. His stuff is linked down below. Today's video was sponsored by www.mulliganbrothers.com, the best motivational clothing brand in the world, where you can now get the Rise and Grind t-shirts, and the new book has just dropped as well. Link in the description. Thank you so much for listening, guys. And remember, this whole channel is about inspire change. So if this has inspired change for you, share it with somebody else. And if you want to have real impact and real change and create real change around your local community, around your family, around your friends, you do that through action. So you move through your life with purpose and passion towards a goal that you are dedicated to achieving. People will be watching, people will see that, and you inspire them to do the same in their own, whatever it is, whatever they want to do in life, you inspire them because you're doing it. And that is basically inspire change. So go do that, guys. Have a blessed and productive day, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.